Hello friends, I'm Kerry Pharr. Welcome to today's edition of In Your Corner. We're going to talk about overcoming addiction today. So if you have a friend or loved one that's battling addiction, I want you to call them right now because we have an amazing story to share with you. Scott Highberger and his wife Dannielle are with us, and they have an amazing story. Scott, Dannielle, so good to see you on In Your Corner. Thank you for joining us.
We're so pleased to be able to be here. It's such a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much.
Scott, you told me before that you'd been in jail something like 36 times.
Yes, 35 times. In and out, in and out, in and out. Started young.
You look like the all-American young man. How in the world did all of this, happen in your life?
Basically just grew up in Michigan City, inner city in Indiana, just in a pretty crazy school and just
Is that pretty close to Gary in Chicago? And
right. It's about maybe 20, 30 minutes east.
It's pretty rough, right?
Yeah, pretty rough area. Yep. Grew up out there and just getting in trouble all the time, fighting. Ended up getting arrested and at like 12 years old for the first time, and that just opened up the floodgates, and alcohol and drugs came shortly after, and then it was just in and out of the cycle, in and out of this pattern of drugs and alcohol, juvenile detention centers, juvenile prisons, and then just graduating on to adult system. The judge, actually, I was in trouble so much as a juvenile that they waived me to adult court when I was 17 just for a public intox, because they were ready for me to be over with. So I spent my first time in jail at 17 and then just kept going, in and out.
What was your home life like?
It was, it looked kind of normal from the outside, but there was dysfunction, alcoholism inside the home. So, I grew up watching my parents drinking, and it was a mixed home. I had a stepfather that was raising me from 2 years old, and then my mother. And he brought some kids in, and my mom brought some kids in, so we had this mixed household, a little bit of crazy going on, alcoholism in the house, and it was just not a lot of supervision. I'm like 7, 8 years old just running the streets. It was a pretty crazy situation, but I think about it now that I have a stepson that's 13, and we don't really let him go too far, and here I am 8 years old, like all around town. So it was pretty crazy thinking about that, but I found a lot of stuff to do that I wasn't supposed to do.
That you weren't supposed to do?
Right.
Your story sounds similar to mine when I was a young man in Detroit. Dannielle, you didn't grow up with the same type of background.
No, I didn't. I grew up on a dairy farm in Ohio.
Really?
Yes.
A dairy farm?
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot to get into bad on a dairy farm, was there?
Not so much. Kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but Scott, once you started this cycle of alcohol and drugs, there was nobody that intervened. I mean, you just kept getting into trouble over and over and over again.
Nobody just really understood it. I didn't even understand it. And that was like the real, the crazy thing about it all is that they were family, friends were just like, why do you keep doing this? I'm like, I don't know, and we're both standing there like, I don't know why I keep doing it, and I just I just got this cycle in, that what you repeat grows stronger. So I was just repeating these crazy habits over and over and over again, and then they just got a hold of me. It was like an invisible prison that I was locked up in, and I was just in this pattern and just going round and round the same things. And my family and friends are all looking at me like, man, do you like going to jail? You keep going back. And I'm like, that's my favorite thing, like I love going to jail, right? No, but I just keep landing there in these drugs and alcohol. When we're 12, 13 years old and we're taking that first drug or that first drink, we're just having fun, we're having a good time. But we have no idea, 10 years later, 20 years later, the grip and the hold that it gets on you, and it just rips your life to pieces.
And the younger you start, it seems like the stronger the addiction becomes.
Right. It like just grab, those roots get in, it comes in as a seed time, and then that harvest of destruction just comes out of just all the things that come with it. And alcoholism was the first thing that really opened the door, and I just began to just drink. I was passed out drunk, just living crazy in 7th, 8th grade. I picture that, and I see kids 12, 13, 14 years old, and I'm like, man, I was so little, but I was getting wasted off of hard liquor, skipping school, passing out. It was.
You think you're an alcoholic at 13 or 14?
I would say by 15 or 16 for sure, because it was building, it was growing, you know, and it just started to become a part of my life, and then leading into becoming the center of my life. That drugs and alcohol were the center of my life. Like everything began to revolve around drugs and alcohol. So everything that I thought about, everything that I was doing, it was all a part of the strategy of how am I going to get more drugs, how am I going to get more alcohol. And for me, money wasn't money. It wasn't like money wasn't a monetary value to me. It was more like it was a means to get more drugs and more alcohol. So that when I got money, that's what it went towards. And that's just, and those roots just began to get deeper and deeper and deeper in my life, just choking out every good thing. And then at the same time, family and friends are just, you know, standing around like, why are you doing this to yourself, you know? So that was a part of my insanity of it all. It's like, I want to stop. You know, the first, you know, 5 years or so, it's all fun and games. 10 years later, it's like, I really want to stop and I can't, you know, and the part of the insanity of it all is I desperately wanted to stop, making hundreds of promises that I meant with tears, and I really wanted to stop, but I just couldn't stop. I couldn't shake it, and I didn't know what to do. Just doing what I've always done, you know, it's just that whole thing. You get in that cycle, and even though it's dysfunctional, even though it's painful, even though it's breaking your heart, it's familiar.
What was, you know, when you would get drunk, what was it that you would do to get wasted?
I would be drinking hard liquor, I'd be drinking beer, and then that would lead to cocaine. And then cocaine led to crack cocaine. And that's really what began to really drag me through the dirt, you know, and that's what kept bringing me lower and lower and lower, humiliating my life, and just bringing me to a place where I was just beat. You know, I even tried to kill myself a couple of times because I was so sick of me. Everybody else was sick of me, but I was sick of me too.
You lose relationships, you know, almost immediately when you start living like that, don't you?
Right.
Take us through the cycle, though. I mean, you're 13, so you start off alcohol, then you go to cocaine, but then you graduate to crack.
Right.
And kind of explain, you know, to our audience, you know, what each cycle is and how it takes you deeper and the addiction gets stronger.
It just leads to things. It's just basically, it's whatever you repeat grows stronger, you know, and whatever you feed grows. So it's just, you know, it's like that thirst. It's that void that the world talks about inside of us, just trying to fill that void, and we're always coming up empty. So the alcohol was doing it for a while, you know, and that was...
And how old were you when you know, took your first hit of cocaine?
Well, I started using cocaine for the first time when I was about 17, 18.
When you start snorting?
Yeah, started snorting it, but I was spending so much time in jail and prison, I didn't have a lot of time out to get into that, because my cycle was I would be out, live crazy for maybe a month or two, and then I'd be back in for 6 months, a year.
So you'd get clean for a while.
Right.
And folks, you know, most of you probably understand what Scott's talking about, but you know, everybody understands alcoholism, but when you start snorting cocaine, you basically roll up a dollar bill,
right,
and put a run there, and you
right,
just suck it into your nose,
right,
right?
Yes.
And what kind of high does that give you, the cocaine?
You just forget about things, you know, the responsibility, the realities, you know, that just takes it away, you know, but the crash just is devastating, you know, that temporary high, you know, it brings you to a place where you don't have to be with me, and that's the way that I was living my life, is just that I was so sick of me and the way that my life was leading and how destructive it was becoming. I didn't even want to be with me. When I was by myself, I was in bad company. That was my philosophy. So it's like, how can I keep going after, you know, hiding from myself, really, hiding from responsibility, hiding from the law, hiding from all the agony and the pain that I'm causing everybody else watching me go through it. So it was just collecting over time, you know. The alcohol, that's fulfilling for a while. Now I need more, and then the cocaine comes, and then I'm bringing that in, you know.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to get to our audience is the progression
right,
of addiction.
Right.
I mean, some people are just an alcoholic.
Right.
Others are cocaine addicts. Mm-hmm. But you started with alcohol. Then
right,
you went to cocaine.
Right.
Which was, did it give you a little better high than the alcohol?
Yeah, and it was complementary to it. You know, I would drink, and then I would get high on the cocaine. You know, so it was adding to. I wouldn't just wasn't jumping from thing to thing. It was just adding. It started with alcohol, then acid, then marijuana, then here comes the cocaine into my life, and then it's just progressing. Pills were starting to come in, so it's just collecting.
And then you got on crack.
And then I landed into crack, and that was just devastating.
And explain to people why crack is so addictive.
Because it's such a powerful, just
and
immediate.
What's the difference in cocaine and crack cocaine?
Cocaine, I mean, you would snort it in powder form. A crack is that you're adding different elements to it, and you're smoking it, so it goes into your system faster, you know. So it's just an immediate, just an explosion in your mind, you know. It doesn't last very long.
Boom!
Right.
All of a sudden you get,
And then, you know, and it's an immediate explosion, and everything disappears, you know. And it's also, it doesn't last very long either. So it's a very short high.
So you've got to repeat.
You got to
cycle.
continue to repeat it, and that's why people do so much crazy, just despicable things to try to go after getting that high again, because it's so explosive, it's so powerful. And it doesn't last very long, and people just fly off the handle and just do the craziest things to get more of it, you know.
You know, I remember a user saying to me one time is too many,
Right.
and 1,000 times is not enough.
Absolutely.
Now that sounds like a paradox to somebody who's never done drugs.
Right.
But what he was saying is, once you do it that one time,
Yeah.
1,000 times will never satisfy
No.
the craving.
Exactly. You know, when I look at it like this from a biblical perspective, is that we have the world says we have a void in our lives that we need to fulfill, but it's really a God-sized hole. It was a setup by God. And we're trying to fill this God-sized hole with all these things, and we're coming up short. So
Self-medicating.
Self-medicating, and it's just, these things are just disappearing in a God-sized hole that it wasn't meant to be able to fulfill or fit, you know. And we always, you know, it is the one's too many and 1,000's not enough. We're just going to keep going deeper and further and wider, because that hole is a God-sized hole that only He can fulfill, that only He can satisfy.
So you were trying to satisfy this hunger, this craving, this hole in your life.
Right.
And drugs, alcohol, none of that would fulfill.
None of it.
And it took you, I mean, you were basically nearly killing yourself, and
Right.
you're in jail and prison
Right.
over 30 times.
Yes. And it was just an incredible cycle of just in and out, in and out, in and out. Couldn't shake it, wanted to shake it, wanted to break free, wanted to live a different life. But I just felt like I was, you know, living literally like behind the wire of life, like looking out, and I'm like behind this invisible fence of like looking.
And you wrote this book called Behind the Wire.
Behind the Wire, right.
We'll let you tell us about Behind the Wire in a minute, because I want you to share with
Right.
us how you were rescued from alcohol and drug addiction.
Right.
And a life of being incarcerated.
And I was just in this like invisible prison that I describe it as, and it's just a spiritual prison, you know. And even when I was in jail, I was in jail and I was in prison, I was a prisoner. But even when I was at home, I was a prisoner, because I was trapped in this cycle. I was trapped in this pattern that I wanted to shake, you know. And 35 arrests. I mean, I couldn't stop. 5 times the prison. That's ridiculous. All my friends, my running buddies that I grew up with for years, they're dropping and dying all along the way. They're all dying right around me. My 2 best friends literally died in the same year, you know, 4 months apart. So it's just like everybody's dying around me. And, you know, in the midst of all of this, I had like this little bit of hope, man. I knew that I had some potential inside me, that I could do something different, that there was something different for me. But I had started so young, and this stuff was so strong, and so it was so powerful in my life, and I couldn't shake it, no matter how many times that I made promises, or how many times I tried, and just going into different programs and things that didn't have God in them. You know, it was just, I was getting smarter,
But,
but no power.
yeah.